Good morning. Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the video. I am excited about this video, and it all started because last year or the year before, I told myself I would read like one fantasy book a month. And I did that for a couple months, but I am determined to become a fantasy girly. I want to be one so bad. And in order to do that, I need to read fantasy sci-fi, I think. I have put together a list of more than 20 books that I would like to read this year, and we can call it my fantasy TBR, if you will. Let's just go through the list. The list ranges from YA to, I think there's like a couple sci-fi in there, maybe one book that's like considered sci-fi, but I'm determined to be a fantasy girly. So let's get into it. Let's just start out with a couple of like YA books that I want to read. And I'm realizing most of these are series. So this is like going to be a list of books / series in the fantasy genre that I want to read in 2024. We're already 3 months into 2024, and I'm trying to remember if I've read a fantasy book or not. I think so. I read Bride, so that would be like romantic fantasy. I want to get into like high fantasy. I've read Mistborn, I've read some Sarah J. Maas, read Game of Thrones, at least the first one. I want to like expand my horizons and just like jump into the world head first, no holding back. So the first 3 series that I have are YA series, and the first one is going to be Bloodmarked. This is actually the second book in the Legendborn series, and I read Legendborn when it first came out, but I haven't read this one yet. And I kind of feel like that's a little bit of a tragedy because I was super hyped for this when it came out, but as we know, I get very hyped for books and then I get them and then I don't read them. It takes me years to read them. So this is like the first one on the list. It continues the story of Bree, and this is like, it has to do with Arthurian legend. I need to read this. I saw Barnes & Noble has like the paperback version and it has like the red edges. I'm like, why do they always come out with that second? It's such a beautiful, like, I love the red edges. I got the hardcover version because that was the one I got it like, I think the day it came out, probably in like 2022. I need to get the hardcover of the first one to match my first Legendborn book because the first one I have is like an art copy, so it's not a hardcover. So I need to have them match because that's obviously important. Next series I want to read is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. I have read the Caraval series. I have read and loved the Caraval series. I read it as they were coming out, and it is like one of my favorite YA series, one of my favorite YA fantasy series. So I need to read this series, and I'm surprised that I haven't yet because it's about Jax, and Jax is a character in Caraval. And I remember loving Jax. I think he shows up in book 2. And I remember really, really loving book 2. It's a trilogy and I have all 3 books already. There's really no excuse. Then I also want to read This Woven Kingdom. I've heard great things about this book. I think I've only read one book by Tahira Mafi. Yeah, I've read the first Shatter Me book. And that's it. Even though people talk about Aaron Warner. So I really want to jump into this series. It's a trilogy and I heard great things. I believe it's about a marriage of convenience. No, it's not. It's not a marriage of convenience. It just says, to all the world, Alize is a disposable servant, never to be known for who she really is, the long lost heir of an ancient Jinn kingdom. Until one day she makes a mistake. The crown prince Cameron has heard the prophecies. He knows of the fearsome monster promised to kill his king. Darkness is fast descending upon his empire, driving Cameron to desperately seek out its source. But as he grows ever more suspicious of the servant girl with the strange eyes, the more he learns about her, and the harder it is to turn away, even if falling for someone like Alize, I like that name. Alize means forfeiting everything he's ever known. So maybe it's forbidden fantasy romance, and I love that. I also love the covers. I only have the first one. I don't have any of the other ones yet because I tried to tell myself that I'm not going to keep buying the other books in a series if I have not read the first one. Now let's get into the like adult fantasy, I guess you could say. Let's just start off with Brandon Sanderson. There's gonna be another video called My Year of Sanderson because I want to read all of his books. And I've read Mistborn, but this is the second one. This is The Well of Ascension. And I really liked Mistborn. I was always really intimidated by his books because they're huge, and again, I'm a newbie fantasy girly. I didn't think his writing was accessible, but then I read Mistborn and I'm like, it is accessible. I have heard people say that if you want to transition from like YA fantasy to adult fantasy, that Mistborn is a really good first book and series to start with. And so that's what I did, and now I'm on the Well of Ascension. I only read like a little bit of it. I haven't, but I need to finish it. And it's my goal to like finish this series this year for sure. And then let's just go to my new favorite, R.F. Kuang. I read Yellowface earlier this year, a couple months ago, I think in January. I read Yellowface and I absolutely loved it. And I know that that's not fantasy, but I love her writing and I really want to jump into more of her stuff. So I'm determined to read The Poppy War. I started reading The Poppy War like a long time ago, but I didn't, again, I wasn't a fantasy person at the time. Fantasy and sci-fi have always been really inaccessible to me and my brain. You know, they say the more you do something, the more you read, the better at it you'll get. So I'm hoping that the more I read fantasy, even if I don't completely understand it like right away, I hope that the more and more I read fantasy, the more and more I will start to like understand the different worlds, and my imagination will expand, because that is what I have a hard time with, expanding my imagination to things that I've never seen before. I'm hoping that me just diving headfirst into fantasy expands my mind. So first one, Poppy War. This is a trilogy, and I have heard people say that this is like their favorite trilogy. It has literally changed their lives and they've become super emotional about it, and I love that. I want to be ripped apart by anything that I'm reading, and I've heard great things about this, so I need to jump into this. And then I just want to read everything by R.F. Kuang, honestly. So I'm gonna read Babel. I actually have the hardcover of Babel, but then I saw that the paperback came out and I really wanted to get it. So now I have the paperback. Even though the font is like kind of small, that's okay. I would rather read a paperback than carry a huge hardcover on the train. Next, I wanna read The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. I have heard that this is part of the Sapphic trifecta, which includes The Jasmine Throne, She Who Became the Sun, and The Unbroken. These have been referred to as the Sapphic and wow, they all have the same color palette. I just realized that. They have been referred to as the Sapphic trifecta, and they're all Sapphic fantasy, and they are all written by people of color, and I would love to read this. I'm behind because people were reading this years ago, but it's okay, it's never too late. So those are the next like 3 series I want to read. I believe this is also a trilogy. I believe they came out with some more books in this series. And then I also actually have the second one for this. I don't know if it's a trilogy or a duology, but I already have the second one. If I want to read these and I'm loving the series, I can just like continue. I also want to read Immortal Longings by Chloe Gong. I've never read anything by Chloe Gong. I bought this book last year. I think I bought it on my birthday, part of my birthday haul, and I'm really excited to read it. It says that it's inspired by Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra, a fiery collision of power plays, spilled blood, and romance amid a set of deadly games. So it's giving me Hunger Games. Hunger Games mixed with Shakespeare, mixed with romance. And as we all know, if you saw my last video, you know I already read Hunger Games, and now I'm constantly on the hunt for like anything that has any kind of games, any kind of like Hunger Games-esque things. I like reading about this like idea of games. So I would love to just do like a reading vlog on like books that have like games in them. I mean, I know like Throne of Glass has one. I've read that one already. Powerless by Lauren Roberts has like games, and that's been compared to Hunger Games. I know that Immortal Longings, and then also Red Rising, which is also on my list. I've heard this has kind of been compared a little bit to Hunger Games. Yeah, reminiscent of the Hunger Games and Game of Thrones. That's like what a review said. So that's also a series I want to read, Red Rising. I have heard nothing but good things about this series. It's, I believe, an original trilogy, and then they have kind of like the next iteration of books. I think it's 3, and I believe the last one just came out. I think it's called Lightbringer or something. I think it just came out this past year. I've heard nothing but good things about this. The thing about fantasy, or I believe this is like sci-fi, I don't know, but I am intimidated by a lot of fantasy sci-fi books. That's the reason I've been putting so many of these off, because scared that I'm not gonna understand it. And that is exactly how I feel about the next series, which is the 5th season. I really want to read this series. I've heard only good things about it. It's a trilogy. I'm just nervous that I won't understand it, and that makes me sad, but it's okay. In order to learn and understand, I have to just give it a chance. So I want to read this. I want to read both of her series this year. I think that would be cool. I feel like I kind of want to start out with this one. It is set in our world. It's set in New York, so I might be able to understand it a little bit better. But I am determined to read both of these and to read something by N.K. Jemisin. I don't think I've ever read anything by her. Maybe a short story, but I don't think I've read a full-on novel by her, and both of her series for me are on the list. And I know she has a couple other ones, but these are the 2 that I own, so I definitely want to read these. I saw these at the bookstore the other day, and I was like, I need to get this. A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. Now, I know this is the prequel to The Priory of the Orange Tree. These are huge, huge books. And I've heard that you can read them in either order because one is a prequel. And the first one that came out, though, is Priory. But the second one is the prequel, and I heard that you can actually read this before this. I'm not sure. I had a hardcover version of this, and just the binding just did not work. So I wanted to get it in paperback, and I love the colors of this second one. This is like, feels like a month-long read for me. It's huge. These books are so big. And that's another thing that I like about fantasy, is that there's a part of me that like wants to just spend time like in a world, like spend time engulfed and just entrenched in one single world that is not ours. That is not ours, because ours is scary. I understand the idea of escapism. I mean, I read a lot, yes, but I read like romance or fiction, but to be engulfed in a world that is like completely unlike our own, and where I really have to use my brain to imagine what it looks like, there's something about that sounds really, really appealing to me right now in my life. So that's why I think I'm like really wanting to just gravitate towards fantasy and just kind of like escape a little bit. I feel like that would be nice. Another book I want to read is called The Will of the Many. I actually already started this one and I've been tabbing it. I started this when I was back in California, and I got 162 pages. I've also actually been reading it on my Kindle because this is big and it's a lot to carry on the train. So I've been reading it on my Kindle, but this is like kind of like a dark academia, I would say, but it's like an academic fantasy book. And I think that's really interesting. I've heard great things about this. I am liking it so far. It's taking me a little bit to understand what the hell is happening and where the story is going, because there's a lot of buildup and a lot of kind of like exposition to understand the world and understand like the characters. And so I am reading this very slowly. I put it down for like a second, but I want to pick it up again soon to finish it, because I feel like if I finish this, I would feel very accomplished. I would feel very proud of myself. Next, I want to read Mailce. I have heard nothing but good things about John Gwaine. This gives me more like Game of Thrones vibes, which I have read Game of Thrones. The Banished Lands has a violent past where armies of men and giants clashed in battle, but now giants stir anew. Stones weep blood, and there are sightings of giant worms. These who can still read the signs see a threat far greater than the ancient wars, for if the black sun gains ascendancy, mankind's hope and dreams will fall to dust, and it can never be made whole again. So John Gwaine hits all the right spots in his epic tale of good versus evil. Sounds interesting to me. Sounds great to me. Giants. I didn't know it was about giants. That's cool. I also want to read The Blood Trials. Again, another book with, I think, games. Blending fantasy and science fiction, N.E. Davenport's fast-paced, action-packed debut kicks off a duology of loyalty and rebellion in which a young black woman must survive deadly trials in a racist and misogynistic society to become an elite warrior. Sounds like real life, but set in a fantasy world. I heard it's fast-paced and like so, like look at the cover, it's so cool. So I'm really excited to read this one. I know I think the second one is already out. The Blood Gift, which is the second book in this, came out in 2023, last year, April 2023. So If this goes well, I will be reading the second book. Next, I want to read Jade City. Again, I've heard nothing but good things. This is a trilogy. I have the first and second one. Every time I go to the bookstore, I look at this trilogy and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna buy the third one. But I have not read the first two, so I have to hold up and read this. It says, for centuries, honorable green-bone warriors have used magical jade to enhance their abilities and defend the island of Kaigen from foreign invasion. Now the war is over, and a new generation vies for control of Kaigen's bustling capital city. 4 siblings of the powerful Call family must prepare for battle, and the fragile peace between the clans is about to break. Something about like family in like fantasy novels, or even like found family. I really love reading about that. I think it'll be really interesting to read about this family and all the characters, to see who's good, who's bad, who's evil, like who's doing what for their family, or like who is making wrong decisions. I heard this is like The Godfather. One of the reviews is extremely tense political maneuvering and intrigue. Fondly is the new Mario Puzo. Jade City has officially dethroned The Godfather. That's huge. Family is duty, magic is power, honor is everything. Family is duty, magic. I love that. I'm excited to read this. Next, I want to read Promise of Blood. I saw this on YouTube. There was a girlie that I watched, and she's a fantasy girlie. She mentioned this as being one of her like favorite series. And I believe this is like what happens after you've killed the king. It's a bloody business overthrowing a king, but amid the chaos, a whispered rumor is spreading. A rumor of a broken promise, omens of death, and the gods returning to walk the earth. Sounds good. I believe it's a trilogy. Yeah, book one of the Powder Mage trilogy. A lot of these are trilogies, which I'm realizing, which is good, because then it's like I'm not doing a crazy long series. It's like, okay, 3 books and you know, we can move on, instead of 16 books and you're still in the in it. Wheel of Time is like a series that I would love to read one day. I think it's 14 books. I feel like I need to be very far in my fantasy journey to get to Wheel of Time and like stick with the series for 14 books. I think the longest series I've read is like Pretty Little Liars, and that's like 16 books, but they're not that hard to understand. So that'll be later in my fantasy journey. I also want to read The Sword of Kaigen. All these books I've heard great things about. This is actually also on Kindle Unlimited, but I remember wanting a physical copy. This always happens to me. I always want a physical copy of something. It shows like what happens to people. I believe it's like about a mother and a son and how the war like really affects them. And I heard it's bloody and gruesome and heart-wrenching, and I am really sit in this story. I don't think I've ever read anything like this. I think this story is going to be really intriguing and really tough to read, and I think it'll be really challenging, and I'm excited for that. I was trying to get the sticker off. I didn't realize my sticker was still on here, but I also want to read One Dark Window. I believe this is a duology. At least there's only 2 books out right now, so it could be a trilogy, but there's only 2 books out right now. I don't know if there's romance in this at all. I guess it's about a girl named Elspeth. Elspeth needs a monster. The monster might be her. So it's about a girl who has a monster inside of her. I mean, don't we all? An enchanting tale with sharp claws and teeth. A maiden must unleash the monster within to save her kingdom in this dark, lush, gothic fantasy debut. I like this cover. This seems like a dark and like gritty time, so we'll see. I have been wanting to read Godkiller for so long, and I ordered the UK version because it wasn't out when I ordered it. Like, it wasn't out in the US. I really wanted to read it, and so I have like this huge version of Godkiller, but then the other day in the mail, I got the second book. If you... 2 different sizes, but that's okay. The covers are both equally gorgeous. Honestly, looking at them, they're both equally gorgeous. 2 very different sizes, but this is the first one, and I don't know if it's gonna be a trilogy, a duology, or what, but I have been wanting to read Godkiller for so long. So this is very, very high up on my list. I also want to read The Adventures of Mina Al-Sirafi. I was really excited when this book came out because it seems like a, you know, high stakes adventure on the sea, and there's maybe like pirates, and that sounds so fun to me. I never have read fantasy with pirates and set on the seas, and it says a new trilogy of magic and mayhem on the high seas. In this tale of pirates and sorcerers, forbidden artifacts, and ancient mysteries in one woman's determined quest to seize a final chance at glory and write her own legend. It sounds cool. I don't know. Oh, I guess it is going to be a trilogy. It says it spins a new trilogy. So I also haven't read the Davabad trilogy. Everybody loves that trilogy. I've never heard anybody say anything bad about it, and maybe I need to read that by Shannon Chakraborty. I like her last name, Chakraborty. I feel like maybe I need to read the Babel trilogy too. Maybe after I read this, if I really like it, I'll pick up that trilogy. Last but not least, I want to read The Final Strife. This cover is gorgeous. Gorgeous. In the first book of Visionary Fantasy Trilogy, all these are trilogies, with its roots in the mythology of Africa and Arabia, 3 women band together against a cruel empire that divides people by blood. And it has like a cool map. I believe the second book is already out, and I believe the third one is going to come out soon. And she's thick, but I've heard great things about this. I love this cover. Jesus Christ. This is such a beautiful cover. Wow. Yeah, this cover is beautiful. Last but not least, this is one of the books that I want to read this year. My list is high. There's a lot of books I want to read. I mean, I want to read Dune. I also want to read more Brandon Sanderson. I want to finish my Game of Thrones read. So there's a lot of fantasy books, but like these are the ones that are high up on my list that I want to like start my fantasy journey with. So if you made it this far, thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments if there's any books that you've read that you're excited about, or anything you think I should start with first. And let me know if there's any videos you want me to do on any of these, because I will definitely be doing videos on reading some of these books, because I will become a fantasy girly by the end of this year. Mark my words, I will be a fantasy girly by the end of this year. That means I need to sink my claws into fantasy, just dive right in, and that's what I'm gonna do. So if you made it this far, thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Follow me on TikTok, follow me on Instagram, because I love doing this, and please subscribe to the channel. But until next time,